What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis and break down what's going on with Tesla's share price, and also talk about why tomorrow is going to be a huge day for the markets as PPI is coming out, not to mention other very big pieces of economic data for next week. Now, before I break anything down about how this data may affect the charts we are seeing, how it may affect Tesla, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 10 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is any could be a free Tesla share. If you deposit $1,000, you'll also have the chance to get a win $60,000, and you'll also get 20 free stocks. So please check it out, guys, before they run out. Offer ends in a week. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla is down about 0.34% for the day, but overall we did get that big bounce I was talking about off this 169 to 170 zone. So the real question is, will we continue to push up from here, or will we just collapse from here and see Tesla make new lows? Both are very possible, but they're going to depend heavily on the PPI report and how the markets respond to that. So PPI is coming out tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. This is 1 hour before the market opens tomorrow. The big report is coming out, and I want everyone to be very prepared for it, because this will move the markets, in my opinion, and will give us many big indications of what the Fed may end up doing going forward. Now, the forecast is about 7.2%, so I'm hoping we see something around that range and maybe lower than that. And what's very interesting is, typically when this comes out, it tends to be a lot lower than the actual forecast. We can see that this happened for the October report, the September one. It was actually a little bit higher for September, but then in August and July, it was actually like lower for those months. So I'm hoping that we see another continuation of this coming down. That's going to be pretty good for the markets. This could help the bulls actually gain the edge and pump the markets for a little bit longer. Now, for Tesla specifically, there's some interesting things going on. I'm noticing that the volume is still relatively high on Tesla, and if anything, it's actually not a good sign to see Tesla dropping on this relatively high volume. But Tesla was green for some parts of the day, so that's a sign that we are seeing lots of nice price discovery, nice price action, and more of the buyers stepping in alongside sellers. Now, on top of that, we're also seeing the overall short volume percentage is actually a little bit higher than before. This is a sign that the shorts gained the edge on the stock, but I do believe that it's going to make a big move in either direction depending on the data that comes out. Now, historically, looking at Tesla, it is important to note that we are still underperforming compared to SPY. You can see right here a big drop in the price per ratio, showing some more relative weakness on Tesla, but this could change depending on what happens tomorrow. What else is worth noting is we're seeing good intraday volume. We saw lots and lots of buying pressures. Lots of buyers came right around here when Tesla came down here. We did see some selling pressure up here as well, but more people are still actually willing to come in and buy these dips on Tesla, at least for the short term, meaning that there is a chance Tesla could get a big bounce, as it is pretty oversold. But like I said before, it's also going to depend on economic data. Tesla tends to be green about 48% of the time on Fridays. So technically, the data is not necessarily on our side from a historical basis, but there is still hope because of the fact that we are seeing the short interest at this relatively high place. I'm hoping it downtrends just a little bit more, as some more shorts may cover their positions if things are better than expected. So just to make this clear, tomorrow PPI comes out. If this is better than expected, if this number is lower than expected, it's going to show inflation is potentially cooling off, which de-incentivizes the Fed to be more hawkish during the next FOMC meetings. It also increases the odds of the hard landing not being as hard in a way. So I'm really hoping that this does start to come down. It's going to be a lot better for everyday producers, consumers, and the entire American economy as a whole. Now, if this is higher than expected, if inflation is higher than expected from the producer side, it's going to be a bad indication for CPI, and the whole market could actually start crashing from here. So let me actually break down something else that's important on SPY, which can affect Tesla, and that is the overall daily trend I mentioned yesterday. So just to remind you guys, look at this trend right here. I'm going to quickly go over this. Basically, we got a big rejection off resistance. We see this big drop, one last bounce, followed by another big drop. This is what happened earlier this year. For March, we hit resistance on the top of this big push, big rejection, one last bounce before the big drop, and the bounce could last a couple of days or even like a week. Same thing happened back in the month of August. We hit the resistance all the way up here, big rejection, big bounce, followed by another big sell off. And as of right now, what are we seeing? We saw this thing basically touch resistance. So the blue line right here, we touched resistance right here. We got a big rejection. SPY came tumbling down. This also was accompanied by Tesla coming down. And we got a bit of a bounce so far. And I'm hoping that this bounce continues before the next leg down. Now, whether or not this bounce continues or if we could push up even higher, in this case, it depends a little bit less on technicals and more on the data itself. What does the data tell us? If things are better for CPI and PPI, we could see this thing potentially push up a little bit higher, maybe break above 400 before getting a big rejection coming down. And I believe that would be accompanied by Tesla finally getting a bounce in that case, if that is what is set to happen. For Apple, we're seeing some nice strength on Apple. It's up almost 1.3%. Overall, looking at the trend on the daily, this thing got a nice bounce right here. And we are seeing a very, very good amount of potential for it to bounce after being so oversold over the last couple of days. So this could actually help the markets if Apple gets a big break from this zone. And if Apple breaks above this resistance around 143.5, this thing has the potential to push all the way up to about this 144.75 to 145 zone, which could pump the markets. You could even argue that there is an inverse head and shoulders like formation, but there's no guarantee these always play out, as you guys saw on Tesla just a couple of days ago. Now, for the QQQ, this thing has a very similar setup as SPY. You could argue that we are in this like accumulation phase, kind of like a Wyckoff accumulation phase. I mean, it is debatable, but it really depends on how much conviction you actually have. So notice how we have this like big sell-off. We have the sell test in phase B, followed by a bit of an accumulation right here before the sign of strength and the last push. So notice how we have something very similar going on. I'm not guaranteeing that this will happen though, guys, but I just want to make it clear. If we are in this accumulation schematic, this could be like our sign of strength right over here, very similar to this right here, the sign of strength. And we may have one last push coming because of the data. That is what this is suggesting. I'm not guaranteeing it though, guys, because like I said before, it depends on the data. It could go either way, but I am a little bit more inclined to thinking we're going to see this push up. Just to give you guys my guess, I don't truly know though, so please be prepared for anything. For something else that's worth noting is the dollar index. This thing has been on a downtrend, but it's starting to base around this 104.73 to 104.75 range. That's where the support is. If it bounces to the upside, this would be bearish for the markets. So far, there's no sign of it. It's getting pretty tight, so it is getting ready for a big move. And as of right now, I mean, if it does break down below 104.75, this thing could come down to this 104.6 zone, which is a bullish sign for the markets. And finally, on the VIX, something good for the bulls is this is starting to respect a downtrend. You guys could see we had a head and shoulders like formation. I mentioned this, I believe, not that long ago as being a potential formation, and this is starting to play out. We are starting to see this downtrend. So if the downtrend does continue going into tomorrow, it is very likely the market could actually pump up a bit more. But there's no guarantee of that, like I mentioned before, guys. You still have to be prepared for anything. But as of right now, the VIX looks a little bit more bearish than bullish, which is a pretty decent sign for the markets. And from a technical standpoint, like I mentioned before, I was pretty fixated on us getting a nice bounce. It's just that we didn't get as big of a bounce as what I wanted to see. The market was looking kind of weak as time went on. However, if the data is better than expected, this thing could continue to push on SPY. So SPY gets a big break above this 397.3 resistance or around here. This thing has the potential, in my opinion, to fly all the way up to about 400 if we break past that in 398. It's worth noting. Am I saying it will happen? I'm not guaranteeing anything, but I'm mentioning that it is a possibility. Now, for Tesla, what does all of this data mean? Now that you guys have the context, on Tesla, we have a pretty okay looking chart. It is looking pretty weak compared to SPY now. And unfortunately, I was hoping Tesla would bounce a lot more than this, but it's not the end of the world because the economic data that comes out could actually help Tesla push all the way back to the 180s. So right now, Tesla's going to be very dependent on data. So technicals should be taken with a grain of salt from this point. Now, what I like about Tesla is we formed kind of like a double bottom like formation around this 169 to 170 170 zone, and this thing did want to actually break out of this. So we saw some buyers stepping in right here, especially on the high volume. You guys could see we had very high volume in the very beginning of the day as Tesla dumped pretty hard with SPY and got a huge bounce to 175. So we are basically, in my opinion, set to channel between 170 and 175. But if we manage to see PPI better than expected and the market ends up pumping, Tesla could break 175. And if that happens, I don't think we're going to get stopped at 177. I think we could go for the gap fill and see 179 to 180 pretty fast. So this does resemble like an accumulative state right here. It could even form kind of like a cup and handle like formation. That could be a lot more bullish for next week, especially because we have CPI coming out, not to mention the big FOMC meeting. So it is worth noting. However, I also want to note that I'm not guaranteeing upside. All right, let's just say inflation is higher than expected from the producer side. This is not going to be good for the Fed. It's going to incentivize them to be more hawkish going into the next meeting. It's also going to lead to more uncertainty about what the Fed is going to be doing, and also a lack of confidence in their current policies, which is going to cause a lot more investors, especially from the institutional side, to start capitulating at a faster rate. So with that said, if that ends up happening, and if inflation is so bad and people start panicking, unfortunately, Tesla could come down and make new lows. It can actually happen pretty fast, and we could see Tesla come well below 166. However, like I said before, I'm not guaranteeing it. We have to see the data first. I do believe, and I'm just going to give you guys my like 2 cents on this. I think it's a little bit more likely that because institutions were buying the way they were recently, they may know something. That's a sign that the market might pump a bit, and maybe Tesla gets this nice push, kind of forming this, like I mentioned, cup-like formation. You could even bring Wyckoff into this, and basically completing this double top-like formation around this 180 level. So I believe it's a little bit more likely for that to happen, but I'm not guaranteeing it because, like I said before, it depends heavily on the data. So anyways, that's essentially what I have for this video. I know I can't promise anything as of right now. I can't say much about what's going on with the markets, but I do want to note one thing. That's the fact that, look, for the short term, maybe Tesla could get a big bounce and start pushing. Maybe it happens, but once the market flips, once SPY actually starts to tank, which is going to happen relatively soon over the next few weeks. I'm not saying it has to start tomorrow. I'm not saying it has to start even like as early as next week. But once this bounce like state is complete, look at what happened every time SPY bounces. After the big rallies and rejections off these levels, history shows us SPY comes down, it bounces a little bit, and then the big bear market returns, the bear rally returns. So right here, rejection, we come down, we bounce a bit, which is why the bull thesis is still possible temporarily, but then a big drop comes a little bit afterwards. All right. So if you know how we got the bounce right now, that's awesome to see. I want to see this continue, hopefully. But even if it continues, in the most bullish possibility, we continue and retest this ascending wedge, a big rejection will come and we are likely going to start to see this thing crash, right? It's going to respect the downtrend. If we don't even see this bullish continuation because of the inflationary data, it could even start as early as tomorrow. I don't truly know yet. And that's why I'm still inclined to thinking we might continue to push up a bit just temporarily before the big drop comes. And maybe Tesla, if anything, it pushes up a bit. It starts to push up just a little bit more, hits the 180s or so if it truly does end up doing that after the data comes out. But I wouldn't turn into a mega bull from there because, like I said, the market could come down relatively soon and that would drag Tesla down. So please be prepared for that. The bull market is not over whatsoever. Even when next year comes, the bull market will still continue, in my opinion. Now, for Tesla, people were talking about this inverse head and shoulders like formation on the daily. Unfortunately, this did not play out. I mean, would I say it's invalidated? I wouldn't say it's entirely invalidated, but there is not really a good thesis for this to could really continue unless we get a very clean and amazing bounce tomorrow. And this thing actually starts pushing up, then there's a possibility of it. But as of right now, like I said, if you look at how weak Tesla's looking, it's a little bit less likely to actually play out that way. I did mention that it is very possible for us to bounce and see maybe like 180 or so, but it's going to depend on data. It really will depend on the data. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. So one lesson to take away from this is, yes, it's amazing to see formations like this, and they do have a tendency of actually playing out the large majority of the time. But the problem is they don't always play out the way you want them to. Sometimes there are traps in this market. Sometimes things don't always go as planned. Sometimes unexpected things could happen, like in the news. So it's always important to be prepared for anything during situations like this. So anyways, guys, that's what I have for this video. Please be ready for tomorrow. It's a huge day. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon, because the long-term future is still super bright, and peace out.